Hello everyone, this is Hackett, and today we'll be talking about what Metasploit is, how it works, and when and why to use it. Let's begin with just basically understanding what Metasploit actually is. It's a framework that consists of many different modules. These modules help us gain access to the victim's machine, starting with the auxiliary modules. This can range from scanning the machine to post-exploitation modules. All these modules come together to help us gain access to a machine uh, simply just using Metasploit. We can also do this other ways without using Metasploit, but the whole purpose of this framework is just to use one tool for all your exploitations. So Metasploit is used to probe the target machine and exploit it with different modules, just like we discussed. There are various different modules that can be used in Metasploit. We'll be talking about them in a minute. Uh, Metasploit is globally used by many cybersecurity firms and pen testers. It's a very famous tool among cybersecurity experts. Moving on, we're going to be discussing the modules for Metasploit. There's actually six of them, but we're only going to discuss the first three because those are the most important ones to understand, and these are the most basic ones to understand. In other words, once you have a grasp of what these three are, understanding the three will be really easy. So let's just begin with auxiliaries. So basically, auxiliaries are anything but the payload modules. These can range from scanners to brute forcing. There's a whole lot of auxiliary modules. Anything that is not a payload is considered auxiliary. Moving on, we got exploits. Exploits are used to take advantage of vulnerabilities and transport the payload. So basically, exploits are a gate. It's basically a gate that takes us to the victim's machine, and once we have crossed that gate, we can deploy our payloads and execute them. So let's talk about payloads. Payloads are deployed to a target machine and then executed using exploits. Once a payload is deployed and it works successfully, you will have some sort of access to the victim's machine. And I've also made a video regarding payloads. If you want to give it a watch, it will definitely increase your knowledge in payloads. Let's move on. Let's talk about auxiliaries and when to use them. Auxiliaries, like I said, can vary from being scanners to brute forcing to many other things. Auxiliary modules can also be used at any time, such as the scanner module can be used to detect vulnerabilities, and the brute force module can later be used to brute force a login page or just a login, a general login. Auxiliary modules are great for figuring out the point of attack and setting up various different strategies. So basically, you can make up your mind how you're gonna come up with this attack using auxiliary modules. These modules are really helpful. Moving on, we have exploits and when to use them. Exploits are used to enter the victim's machine using vulnerabilities. Once the victim's machine has been scanned for vulnerabilities, exploits are deployed to gain access for a possible payload execution. In simpler words, once we figure out the vulnerabilities for a machine, and we know that these vulnerabilities are exploitable, we use our exploits and we gain access to the machine. I wouldn't actually call it gaining access. I would call it that we are able to transport a file or have access to the machine in some sort of way. It doesn't have to be that you have full administrative access. You just have some sort of access to the machine, and once you have some sort of access to the machine, you can exploit it using your payload. So an exploit basically transports our payload, and once the payload is transported, we execute it, and then we will have more access to the machine than we just had by exploiting it in the first place. A payload basically gives us 10 times more access to that machine, considering on the payload. Uh, Exploits are based on vulnerabilities, so different vulnerabilities are going to have different exploits, and different exploits are going to have a different method of execution or transportation. Moving on. When to use payloads. Payloads are deployed to the victim's machine using exploits to gain access and using malicious code. So once we deploy a payload, we can execute it to gain access to the victim's machine, and this access can vary from just being a simple user to being a administrative user. Privilege escalation comes in place when you are already in a system as a you have a payload already running in the background. Then privilege escalation comes in. I will be making a video regarding that later on. But just to understand payloads right now, payloads are basically a set of malicious codes that it's a code that carries crucial information that can be used to hack any sort of device. A payload can vary from a shell to a keylogger, anything that allows us access to the machine, and we can do certain actions inside the machine, such as a keylogger helps you get information that is typed on the keyboard. You can also deploy a shell, and you can use that shell to escalate your privileges as an administrator. There's a lot you can do with the payload, in other words, basically is what I'm trying to say. After exploiting the machine, a payload is initiated by the attacker to compromise the victim's machine. So once you have a payload in there, you can set it up in a way that every time the machine restarts, that payload will restart with it, and once that payload restarts, you will have a connection to that payload. And once you have connection to that payload, you basically have access to that machine. And if you have access to the machine, you basically own that machine, and you can do whatever you want with it. That's not recommended, but it's just I'm letting you know what a payload is capable of doing. And that will be it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate that. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe as it helps me make more videos. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.